All four quarterbacks make the cut in my pre-training camp 53-man roster projection. Find out who else made it on today's episode of the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. It's training camp. It's finally here. And with that, we take a look at the offensive players who make the cut in my 53-man roster projection. Then we look at the defensive side of the ball. And I've got the top 5 non-quarterback storylines that I'll be following during training camp starting today on Wednesday. I do want to thank you for being in every day with the Locked On Browns podcast, making this your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends as well, and it's totally free to you. Just hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you get your podcasts, and of course, at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. You can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comments section. This is your team. So be part of the conversation every single day. And today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. And yes, I did do the cliche thing of mapping out a 53-man roster projection here as training camp commences of what I think this thing, how this thing will sort of shake out by the time training camp ends at the end of August, and they got to cut the roster down to 53 players. And I'm going to start with the offensive side of the ball. And here's the thing. I'm using a little bit of a loophole here because this roster projection doesn't necessarily mean this is what I think is going to be the roster leading up to week 1. Like once we get to week 1 of the season, the preparations are underway for that game against the Bengals that week. I think this thing changes, but I'm sort of basing this off of, okay, when they have to make cuts, when they have to cut the roster on at 53 players, I'm using the loophole of, things are going to change, but this is what I think the roster is going to look like when they make the first round of cuts before they go out and maybe scour the other players that were released by other teams and tweak and make some tweaks, make some adjustments to the roster. This is what I think it's going to look like. And I'm giving you the disclaimer ahead of time. Dustin Hopkins, Corey Bojorquez, Rex Sunahara, those are your specialists. So those 3 positions are already accounted for. I have the rest of the roster, the other 50 players on this roster are in some way, shape, or form put together both with my offensive projection and my defensive projection. And I'll go through it now with you so we don't waste any more time. So first up, and this is the thing that I think is I don't want to say controversial, but this is the thing that I think is going to catch people's attention and certainly be something that we follow throughout the entirety of training camp to see if this actually comes to fruition. But again, going off of the premise that this is the initial roster cut down day, here's, cut and dry how it's going to go, and then there's more tweaks to come. I have the Browns keeping all 4 quarterbacks: Flacco, Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders. And my reason for that is this. I think at some point they're going to trade one of these guys. I think at some point, I think they hope to trade one of these guys. Maybe it never comes to fruition, but I think their hope, or Andrew Berry's hope rather, is to obviously trade one of these guys when it's all said and done, when camp ends. If that doesn't happen before camp officially ends, if that doesn't happen before the 53-man roster cut down day, I think you see Andrew Berry do what he did a year ago, which is, hey, roster cut down days here. We think that we have an asset in one of these veterans, Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett, that somebody else at some point might want because they have a quarterback injury or whatever. And so we're going to keep all 4 of them through the cut down period, and then we'll make the necessary tweaks from there. We saw them do this last year. They kept all 4 of Deshaun Watson, Jameis Winston, Tyler Huntley, and DTR. And then when push came to shove, they had to move on from one. There was rumors that were going to trade Jameis. There was also rumors they were trying to shop Tyler Huntley. As it turned out, they kept Jameis. They couldn't find a suitor for Tyler Huntley. Everyone called their bluff, and so they ended up just cutting him. And that might happen again. That might happen again where they just end up having to cut one of these guys. And I would assume it's going to be one of the veterans. But I think that initial cut down period, when 53-man rosters need to be submitted, they keep all four through that phase of it, try to find a partner to trade with. If it doesn't happen, then they cut the other guy, and then they can make the necessary tweaks or adjustments to the roster as they need. And so keeping four quarterbacks means you got to cut something somewhere else. We'll get to that here coming up. But the next phase, the next group obviously is your running back room. I had them keeping just three, and that's not accounting for, of course, Quinshon Judkins, who's going through his legal situation right now, may end up facing a suspension here. I'm kind of in the back of my mind reserving that possibility of something that's going to happen. And so for that reason, he's not counting against the active roster at this time. So the guys I have them keeping, Jerome Ford, Dylan Sampson, Pierre Strong, they all make the cut. They all make the roster. And that's your three running backs as things stand right now. Now, I am curious to see if they go try to add a running back, particularly during camp. It's just kind of an extra body out there based on what happens with Quinshon Judkins' situation. But I still think ultimately three guys make the cut. That's just my view on it. That's just my stance on it. I could end up being wrong, but I think that three guys make the cut. And I think with Quinshon's pending legal litigation, I think Pierre Strong, or at least at this juncture, feels like he's more likely to make it now than he probably was when, even as recently as a couple weeks back before all this played out. Wide receiver room. This is where I sort of make a cut to keep the four quarterbacks. I have five guys making it right now: Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, Deontay Johnson, Jamari Thrash, and DeAndre Carter, who's your return specialist. That's where I think, and I've talked about this, like making a trade during training camp. The group that's here right now not being the group that's starting, or that is your starting or receiver room. When week one rolls around, I think they're going to make a change. They're going to make an addition at some point. Maybe it comes after they keep four quarterbacks and then make the necessary adjustments, if you will, once they see other guys who have maybe been released around the league or whatever it might be, and they can add somebody to this room to get a sixth. But as things stand initially, I have them getting down to just five to sort of fill out this initial 53-man roster. I also think there is an interesting. I contemplated keeping Luke Floria because I'm actually fascinated. This doesn't make the cut, by the way, for one of my top 5 non-quarterback storylines, which we'll get to coming up. But Luke Floria, maybe as an undrafted rookie, finding a role for himself, carving out a role for himself on special teams, and as maybe a slot receiver for this team, is something to monitor, is something to watch. I'm fascinated by it, and I contemplated keeping him on this roster. But I do think it's one of those situations, too, where he might end up just being a practice squad guy who's still around the team anyway, and then you can promote him when you need to promote him or when you want to promote him. With that said, we move to the tight end room. I'm keeping 4, David Njoku, Harold Fannin Jr., Blake Whiteheart, Brendan Bates. I think with the pivot back to Kevin Stefanski's offense, a lot more 12 personnel. Keeping 4 guys here makes some sense. The first year of Kevin Stefanski's time here in Cleveland, they kept 5 tight ends initially, and then they whittled it down eventually to 4. But there's something to be said for, they're going to be using a lot more tight ends, so you maybe want an extra one, a bonus one. Plus, in Kevin Stefanski's offense, having some guys who can be versatile and play out of that backfield in sort of like a fullback role, which is a position that doesn't really exist anymore, but they often use tight ends in that role, is valuable as well. And that brings us to our offensive line. Pretty straightforward here, I think. There's 9 guys that feel like they're pretty much locked in to make this team, barring any health issues. DeJuan Jones, Wyatt Teller, Ethan Posick, Joe Bitonio, Jack Conklin. That's your starters. Zach Zinter, Luke Whippler, Tevin Jenkins, Cornelius Lucas. That is my offensive 53. And for what it's worth, the math on that, you got 9 offensive linemen, 4 tight ends, 5 receivers, 3 running backs, 4 quarterbacks. Adds up to 25, which leaves 25 more spots to fill on the defensive side of the ball. Who makes the cut in my projected 53-man roster on defense? We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Ever wish managing your money just felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. My wife and I, we were trying to get some bigger projects done around the house this summer. We obviously took a couple of trips, but we needed to get a better look into our financial picture, where we could save some money so that we could do the things that we wanted to do. That's where Monarch Money came in. They make managing our money together as a couple smoother than ever before. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money right now. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis, and maybe you've even tried them yourself. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is the next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue, kicks in fast, an average of 15 minutes, and effects can last up to 36 hours. So you can stay confident when the moment is right. If traditional options just have not worked for you, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL. Use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, and manufacturing review. Please visit Rugiet's website for full safety information. All right, so we go to the defensive side of the ball and our 53-man roster projection here. After keeping 4 quarterbacks, let's see how I shake things up, or if I shake things up on the defensive side of the ball. And maybe the first thing that I think stood out to me and how this all sort of played out was what my defensive line looks like. I think is sort of notable here. And what I mean by that is I only keep truly four like defensive linemen, like interior guys. And I wonder if that's enough, because we know in James Schwartz's defense, you have a team like they like to send waves. They like to have just a deep rotation of players. And so I've looking back on this exercise, that's one area where I've sort of doubted myself and like, do they keep 4? Do they keep a 5th? And they have 5 and 5 defensive linemen and defensive ends. But for now, I'm riding with the fact that they just keep 4 in the initial cut down period. And the 4 that I have, some of these very obvious. Mason Graham being the top guy. Mike Hall Jr., last year's second-round pick, also makes the cut, who, by the way, starts training camp, as the team announced on Tuesday, on the physically unable to perform list. So something notable there, but I don't expect that to linger to the regular season, but we'll see. We'll get some more clarity on that from Kevin Stefanski on Wednesday. But yes, Mike Hall Jr. obviously makes the team. Malik Collins, the vet, who I've been talking up a lot, maybe not talked about enough, makes the team. And then that leaves one more. I leaned Shelby Harris here. Veteran guy, done some nice things here the last couple of years in Cleveland, knows the system, obviously. But listen, I would hear out Juwan Briggs, who I think did come on strong at the end of last season and show you some nice things in meaningless games when he was getting some more playing time and some more reps. And it might be keeping somebody like that might lean into, if you're Andrew Berry, this idea of like, hey, we need to get younger. We need to find talent that we can build around moving forward. Shelby Harris doesn't really accomplish that, so we'll see. But, I think it's almost like a fill in the blank. Shelby Harris, Juwan Briggs, maybe another name comes into mind. And that's where also, if you keep a 5th, I think both those guys make the team. But I only have 4. I have Harris as the 4th. Now we go to the defensive ends. Again, clearly Myles Garrett's going to be part of this conversation. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, who they signed in the offseason, part of this conversation. And for him, too, he is the guy you brought in to, you moved on from Obo Okoronkwo because Joe Tryon Shoyinka essentially fills that role, fills that same exact purpose and void. So it was redundant, right? There was a redundancy there. So I think Joe Tryon Shoyinka is safely on this roster. The two other big ones, Alex Wright and Isaiah McGuire, duking it out for the starting spot opposite of Myles Garrett. That's going to be a fun battle to sort of watch throughout camp and whatnot. And then you got Julian Okwara as my last guy, my fifth guy to make this team at the defensive end spot. I mean, theoretically, you could, if you're only keeping 9 defensive linemen in general, you could keep 4 pass rushers in the first ones I named and take Okora out, or you could keep 5 in the defensive interior. Whatever suits your fancy, I guess. I did it the opposite because I think with Alex Wright and Isaiah McGuire and the hope that they take that next step, I think like you want maybe a little bit more depth there just in case. And I feel better about the guys who are sort of up front on the defensive line and the defensive interior more so maybe in general. So I like in terms of like proven commodities, guys who have been there, and I leaned into that a little bit with the Shelby Harris and him sort of sticking around. But that's my 9 in the trenches that I have staying on the defensive side of the ball for the Browns. Might be surprising to some people. I kept 6 linebackers, which, you know, as you think about the premier positions in football, as you think about the premier positions in this defense, linebacker probably isn't one of them. But the reason I have 6, there's a very valid case here as to why I did it this way. And I think you're going to understand as I walk through here why. But first of all, it is a position group that I think largely people feel is underwhelming, maybe one of the weaker ones for the Browns. And so I'm keeping Carson Schlesinger, obviously. I'm keeping Jordan Hicks, obviously. Devin Bush, barring whatever his legal situation looks like, if he faces suspension, I have him making it. Jerome Baker makes it as a guy they signed this offseason. Mahamoud Diabate, who I think played I think he played well last year, like filling in under adverse circumstances. JOK gets hurt, all those different things. I think he proved like he's a valuable piece to have as a depth player in this room. And so he makes the cut as well. And then the last one's Winston Reed. Winston Reed makes it because, frankly, he's one of the more important Brown special teamers. And also, again, I think showed that he has some value as a linebacker. I'm not saying he's your frontline starter type guy, but to have just the extra depth, I think matters there. So 6 linebackers make it, which may surprise some people. We go to the secondary next, starting with the safety group. I got Grant Delpit, Ronnie Hickman, DeMonte Casey, and then Rayshon Jenkins, the 2 veterans that they signed later in the offseason leading up to camp. I think that group of 4, that quartet sort of makes a lot of sense with Hickman as a starter, Delpit as a starter. Hickman's going to be sort of first up to win that job. And it's sort of a cool story just in general, the fact that he's an undrafted player from a couple years ago. And in year 3 here, he now has a chance to cement himself as a starting player on this roster. So kind of a cool one there. And then the last position we're missing here, of course, is corner. I got 6 guys making the team: Denzel Ward, Martin Emerson Jr., Greg Newsome, Cameron Mitchell, Tony Brown II, again, important special teamer, and then Miles Harden, who is a draft pick from just this past year, Andrew Berry's last defensive back pick from 2024, who makes the cut as well. And that comes back to, I think, too, Andrew Berry doesn't really part ways with a lot of his draft picks this early anyway, but he generally takes a corner or a defensive back in general in the draft. And this year he didn't. So I think he probably keeps the one that he took most recently to see if there's anything there. And this cornerback group is one that's kind of I think this position that this cornerback group is in sort of speaks to, I think it's a microcosm of the team as a whole. Some veterans who are proven talents that are also could be playing themselves into or out of Cleveland, depending on how this year goes in contract years. But also some guys like a Cameron Mitchell, for example, or even a Miles Harden, who need to prove themselves and sort of give you something to look forward to in the future at that spot specifically. So interesting group, that cornerback group, but that's my 25 on defense. I forgot to mention as well, and this also came down on Tuesday night, Deshaun Watson at starting camp on the PUP list. I think he probably starts the regular season on the PUP list as well. And so not mentioned in this projection because I don't think he's going to be on the active roster at that juncture, and we'll see how that plays out throughout the season. But I'm anticipating the PUP list designation we got for Deshaun for the start of training camp carries over into the start of the regular season. What'd you think? What'd you think of my 53-man roster? Did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? Would you keep 4 quarterbacks? Probably not. But I explained myself. I explained why I did it that way. I think maybe initially they could, and then they whittle it down from there and try to make that trade after the 53-man roster cut down deadline. But let me know your thoughts. Hit me up on YouTube. Hit me up at Spencito_. With training camp upon us, of course, there's going to be a lot of different things to take in, a lot of different things to follow. We know the quarterback competition is the quarterback competition, but I got 5 non-quarterback storylines that I'm going to go through and share with you. We'll do it next on the Locked On Browns podcast. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy, and football is nearly back in our lives, which means fantasy football is also back in our lives. Fire up the group chat, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts and all the overreactions we live for. All the things you love about fantasy football can be found at Yahoo Fantasy. Of the handful of leagues that I participate in each year, my favorite one, hands down, is the league that we host via Yahoo Fantasy. This has been my longest standing league. It does help that the people in it are hyper competitive. The smack talk is elite, but the hosting platform can oftentimes make or break your fantasy experience, and Yahoo has mastered it. My friends and I are playing at Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins on August 4th. Stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. And let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. All right, training camp is upon us, and I don't know about you, I still get those first day of school jitters for this time of year. Maybe it's because I just feel I'm grateful to work in this business, to cover an NFL team the way that I get to and talk about it with you here on this platform. And so when training camp gets here, it's always an exciting time. It's the start of a new football season. It's bittersweet because summer is over, but looking forward to another great season, and it should be a lot of fun going week by week, practice by practice with you on this space and elsewhere. So very much excited about it. Very much looking forward to it. And with that said, we know the quarterback situation, the quarterback battle is going to be front and center every single day. It's going to be shoved down your throats. I'll talk about it. Others will talk about it. I want to go away for that for a second because I want to give you the top 5 storylines that I'll be following at training camp that are not related to the quarterback. So the top 5 non-quarterback storylines with this Browns team that I'll be following during training camp. We'll go 5-1 here. And I think number 5 for me revolves around just the feel of Kevin Stefanski's training camp this time around. We know the Greenbrier experience the last 2 years. We know that this team in previous years has also prioritized not getting guys hurt and sort of taking it easy, not going to a certain intensity, but not overdoing it. And I get the sense that that's going to be changing this time around. I get the sense that they think they need to ramp things up a little bit more to get guys ready for the long haul of a season, for the hits they're going to take, for the bumps and the bruises, for the grind of a 17-game season. And so I am fascinated to see what that intensity looks like. If it's there from day one, if it's there, midway through, how they handle this situation in terms of getting players ready for the season and just the way that he's going about it, Kevin Stefanski, that is, I think is going to look and feel differently. And I think if you're somebody who's coming to one of the open practices at all, I think you will feel and see that as well. So just monitoring that and seeing how that vibe feels from last year to this year is going to be worth, I think, monitoring and watching throughout camp. And that's my number 5 on the list. Number 4 on the list. This is something I talked about on the defensive side of the ball in terms of the roster projection I did for the 53. Alex Wright or Isaiah McGuire. Who wins that starting job? Those two are close. They're good friends, but they also, inspire each other to work hard, play hard, practice hard. I would give the leg right now a leg up to Alex Wright, but I think Isaiah McGuire showed some nice things last year, filling in after they traded Zadarius Smith at the deadline. And so both guys have a good shot at it. The Browns are looking for somebody to. This is the first time they're kind of going internal. We're trying to find somebody opposite of Myles Garrett that can, provide some stability. They didn't just do like the run a pass rusher program they've been doing the last couple of years. And so they think one of these guys or both of these guys are ready for that challenge to take on more, if you will. And so watching how they compete, watching how that battle sort of shakes out and who ultimately comes away as the top guy, and the other guy would still play. It's a rotational thing here. But I think that's another top storyline for me, and I have it number 4 on the list. We go to number 3, over halfway there now. And for me, this one's more of a broad one, but just how many of these rookies look ready to contribute? Because I've talked a ton about how this class is so important to Andrew Berry, his future, the respect he gets, the reputation he has as a guy in terms of roster building, and he needs a number of these guys to hit. He needs, I think, at least 3 of these guys to hit, and I think he especially needs the first 2 guys he took in Mason Graham and Carson Schlesinger, the first pick of the second round, to hit. Quinshon Judkins needs to hit, I think, to a large degree, but we might have to sort of put that on hold to find out if he gets a chance to play right away or later in the season, depending on, again, potential league discipline that could come down. But, just what does Harold Fannin Jr.'s role look like? Because they don't have that slot receiver role really honed in yet. We don't know what that's going to look like. It could be a lot of 12 personnel where he's out there in the slot. So can he become a contributor? Do either of these quarterbacks end up hitting at some point? So seeing how many of these rookies look ready to contribute early versus maybe later in the season is going to be something worth monitoring and following. And I mean, that starts now at training camp, and we'll start to see the early remnants of that. I think, maybe Mason Graham looks dominant early, and we're like, okay, like this was it was the right pick, right? Like, we can start to feel good about those things. But at the same time, you might be waiting to see some of these guys a little bit later too. So we'll be following this not just now, but throughout the regular season as well. Number 2 on the list, I talked about the lack of a slot receiver. I talked about the receiver group a ton leading up to training camp, obviously, and the inexperience there. Can Cedric Tillman, can he take that leap? Is he up to the challenge to live up to the hype and the billing that the Browns think he can? They're putting a lot on his plate this year. They're banking on him taking that next step, making even more progress in his game, and becoming this next, foundational receiver in their offense that they've been missing, frankly, during the Andrew Berry era in terms of drafting and developing guys. They think he's ready for it. We'll find out if he is. I think he was trending in that direction last year before the concussions derailed his season. And so I'm actually really excited to watch Cedric Tillman sort of go to work here and start training camp off on the right foot. But that is absolutely a storyline, because right now, as we've talked about, this receiver room is Jerry Jeudy and a lot of unproven or untrustworthy, just names and guys that are still that we all have questions about. So we'll see. And then number 1 for me has to be DeJuan Jones at left tackle. Can he carve out a role there for himself? Can he at least prove and stay healthy and prove that he belongs on this offensive line in some capacity moving forward? Maybe if he moves back to the right side, whatever it's going to be. I think that has to be. I'm that role specifically in his place in it can impact the future of this franchise in such a meaningful way. If they sort of stumble into finding their left tackle of the future here, that fills a massive void that then, again, 2 first-round picks next year, right? Like, how you utilize those, the math kind of changes on that if you feel like you have a guy at left tackle. But even if he doesn't, and Jack Conklin is going to walk, but he stays healthy and he looks solid, but you still want a better player or somebody who's maybe more equipped to be a left tackle, because DeJuan's talked about it. He's more of a right tackle. Then at least you can move him over there, and then the left tackle still is a priority, but you can address it and understand kind of where you're at with it. So, again, I think that's a storyline, start to finish, training camp to the end, regular season to the end. We will be following the health of DeJuan Jones. He's the one guy on this roster, on that offensive line, that's like significantly younger, and you feel like you can build around if he hits. And so I think there's a lot on his plate, has a lot to prove. and I will be monitoring that in his growth and development throughout camp and obviously throughout the regular season as well. So those are my top 5 non-quarterback storylines that I'll be following at training camp, which kicks off today. Exciting times. Listen, this is, of course, I always want you following along with the show, the channel, all that, as much as possible. Off-season, regular season, whatever. But this is where it really begins. Like, I'm going to be doing a lot more short stuff, recapping practice. We'll certainly recap those things on episodes, coming down the pike here. Practice is going to be late on certain days, late on the afternoon. So it'll probably get recapped on the morning after show. But this is the time of year where you want to be engaged, especially. This is the time of year you want to be part of this program. So hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Make Locked On Browns your first listen every day, because the Browns content, the football content, it is getting hot and heavy, officially starting today with training camp kicking off. So please, please, please be part of this community, be part of this network, be part of this conversation. I'm excited about my first full season documenting and following the Browns with you here at Locked On Browns and the Locked On Network. So make us your first listen every day. For your second listen, as always, check out Locked On NFL Scouting, or you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being every day here at the Locked On Podcast Network. It's here. Football's back, at least in practice form. I'll talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. Exciting times. See ya.